The roadside was silent until a U.S. Marine noticed a German Shepherd puppy moving once. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. The roadside was supposed to be empty that morning, a stretch of pale asphalt washed in soft dawn light, the kind of silence that feels almost sacred. Staff Sergeant Caleb Rourke eased his truck onto the shoulder, drawn by something he couldn't name. The air smelled of wet dust and cool earth after a long night, and a faint breeze brushed across the grass like a whisper trying to speak. Caleb stepped out, boots pressing into the gravel with a muted crunch. He paused, listening. Nothing but wind, the faint hum of distant traffic, and his own breath drifting into the chilled morning. And yet, something tugged at him, a quiet instinct sharpened by years of reading danger in places others overlooked. He scanned the roadside, eyes narrowed, the early sun catching the worn edges of his dog tags. Then he saw it. Not a sound. Not even a cry. Just the smallest motion in the tall grass, so delicate it might have been the wind, except it wasn't. It was too intentional, too fragile. Caleb moved closer, each step slow, steady, respectful, as if approaching a moment he wasn't meant to interrupt. The grass parted in thin blades, glistening with dew, revealing a shape no larger than his two hands cupped together. A German Shepherd puppy, fur matted with cold moisture, chest rising in a trembling, unsteady rhythm. It didn't lift its head. It didn't even fully open its eyes. It just shifted, once, as if gathering the last thread of strength left in its tiny body. Caleb knelt, the morning chill seeping through his uniform, and the world seemed to quiet even further, holding its breath with him. He extended a hand but didn't touch the pup yet. He simply let it feel his presence, the warmth in his shadow. "Easy, little one," he murmured, voice low, steady. The pup's ear twitched, a movement so faint it almost vanished in the air. But Caleb saw it. Felt it. Something inside him tightened, a recognition he couldn't explain, the kind a man feels only when faced with a life hanging by a thread. He finally slid his hands beneath the tiny body, careful, gentle. The pup was cool against his palms, too still, too light, like a whispered prayer losing volume. But there was breath. Faint. Present. "You're not done," Caleb whispered, conviction slipping into his tone like a promise he didn't know he was capable of making. The wind swept across the open road again, lifting the edge of his jacket, carrying the scent of dawn and something softer, hope trying to take shape. Caleb stood, cradling the trembling pup against his chest, the beat of his heart steady beneath the small body. For the first time that morning, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like the beginning of something that refused to die quietly. Caleb carried the tiny German Shepherd puppy against his chest as he crossed the quiet stretch of road, the cool morning air brushing his face like a reminder to slow down and listen. The pup's breaths were soft, almost weightless, and each rise of its small chest felt like a fragile promise trying to hold on. Caleb opened the passenger door of his truck carefully, easing the puppy onto a folded flannel shirt he kept on the seat. The warmth from his hands lingered in the fabric, and the pup instinctively curled into it, as though memorizing the safety it offered. For a moment, Caleb stood still, one hand resting on the edge of the open door, watching the tiny creature settle. Memories he never asked for stirred at the edges of his mind, memories of nights overseas when life was measured in seconds and survival depended on noticing what others missed. There had been a time when he felt completely alone in those moments, but this morning did not feel like that. This morning felt like something had chosen him. He started the truck, the engine rumbling low, and the pup shifted slightly at the vibration, a tiny sound escaping its throat. Not a whine. More like a quiet acknowledgement that it was still here. Caleb glanced over and softened. "Stay with me," he whispered, barely audible above the hum of the Heater. The road unwound before him, a long ribbon stretching toward the small town where the nearest veterinary clinic waited. Sunlight broke slowly across the horizon, painting soft gold across the windshield. It struck the pup's fur in a thin line of warmth, and for the first time, Caleb saw the faintest spark of color beneath the damp coat. He turned up the heater a little more, letting the warm air fill the cab. The scent of old leather and pine-scented cleaner mixed with the gentle breath of morning, turning the truck into a quiet shelter moving steadily through the new day. As miles passed, Caleb found himself glancing toward the passenger seat again and again, as if afraid the fragile life might slip away between one heartbeat and the next. But each time he looked, the pup was still there, still breathing, still choosing to stay. A traffic light ahead shifted from yellow to red, and Caleb eased the truck to a stop. A moment of stillness settled over them, the kind that feels almost sacred. He rested his elbow on the steering wheel, eyes softening as he watched a small paw twitch against the flannel. Not a strong movement, nothing bold or dramatic. Just a tiny gesture of persistence. A reminder that even the smallest spark can push back against the cold. The light turned green, and Caleb pressed forward, the weight in his chest shifting from worry to a quiet sense of purpose. He did not know why he had stopped on that silent roadside or why he felt so deeply connected to a life he had only just met. But as the sun climbed higher and the road opened wide before him, he knew one thing with certainty. The tiny German Shepherd puppy was not alone anymore, and neither was he. The small-town clinic came into view as Caleb turned onto a quiet side street lined with maple trees just beginning to show hints of summer green. The sun had climbed higher now, warming the rooftops and softening the cool edge of the morning. Caleb parked near the entrance and took a slow breath before lifting the tiny German Shepherd puppy from the passenger seat. The pup stirred at the motion, a faint tremor running through its small frame, as if reminding the world it was still fighting. Caleb held the puppy close, feeling the delicate warmth through the flannel shirt, and stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed softly, the sound gentle and welcoming, almost like a heartbeat in a room meant for healing. The lobby carried the scent of clean floors and lavender disinfectant. A receptionist looked up, her expression shifting instantly when she saw the bundle in Caleb's arms. She stood without a word and gestured toward an exam room. Caleb followed, each step measured, his boots muted on the polished floor. Inside, the soft glow from an overhead light bathed the room in a calming amber tone. A young veterinarian, Dr. Lainey Carter, entered with a quiet urgency, her presence steady and reassuring. Her face softened as she approached. "Let us take a look," she said, her voice warm. Caleb gently laid the pup onto a warmed blanket Dr. Carter had prepared. The puppy sank into the softness, breathing shallow but steady. Dr. Carter ran careful hands along the pup's sides, checking for injuries, listening to the fragile cadence of its breath. Her brow tightened slightly, a subtle sign of concern that she tried to hide behind a professional calm. "He is very weak," she said softly. "Cold, dehydrated, and exhausted. But there is a chance." The word settled in Caleb's chest like a small light pushing against a long shadow. He nodded, his voice quiet but firm. "Do whatever you can." Dr. Carter wrapped the pup in a heated towel and prepared a small warming pad beneath it. The tiny body twitched, barely noticeable, but enough to show that the warmth reached him. Caleb watched every movement, hands clasped loosely in front of him, knuckles pale. The room fell into a gentle hush, broken only by the soft hum of medical equipment and the slow, steady breathing of the pup. Time moved differently in that quiet space, stretching thin like dawn light over an open field. Caleb found himself remembering mornings on deployment, when hope was something men carried in silence, tucked away behind steady eyes and steady hands. The puppy let out a faint sound, a tiny hum that lasted only a moment, but it drew Caleb closer, as if that whisper had been meant only for him. Dr. Carter glanced up. "He is responding to the warmth," she said, surprised but encouraged. "That is a good sign." Caleb exhaled slowly, a breath he had not realized he was holding. The sunlight from the window slid across the room, catching the edge of the blanket wrapped around the pup. For a brief moment, the light looked almost like a small halo, soft and quiet, settling over a life that refused to let go. Caleb touched the blanket gently with the back of his fingers, careful not to disturb the fragile rhythm beneath. "You are not alone," he whispered. And in that stillness, the pup breathed again, just a little stronger than before. Dr. Laney Carter adjusted the warming pad beneath the tiny German Shepherd puppy, her movements gentle and deliberate, as though every inch mattered. The pup's breathing had steadied into a fragile rhythm, still faint but no longer fading. Caleb stood nearby, leaning slightly against the counter, arms crossed loosely, eyes fixed on the small bundle wrapped in soft fabric. There was a stillness in the room that felt almost sacred, the kind of quiet that only appears when life teeters on a delicate edge and chooses, however weakly, to keep holding on. Outside the window, sunlight settled over the clinic's small parking lot, glinting off Caleb's truck and catching the dust motes drifting lazily through the warm air. The world looked calm, ordinary, almost unaware of the quiet battle unfolding on a metal exam table. Dr. Carter lifted her stethoscope and listened again, her expression easing just enough to let hope slip through. "His heart sounds a little stronger," she said softly. Caleb nodded, a slow exhale leaving his chest. "Good. That is good." He stepped closer, his shadow falling gently across the table. The puppy shifted slightly under the blanket, a tiny movement, barely a ripple, but enough to draw a softened look from both of them. Caleb rested his hand near the pup, not touching, just offering the steady presence that had become second nature to him. Dr. Carter mixed a small electrolyte solution and placed it near the warming towel, letting a few drops touch the corner of the pup's mouth. The puppy responded with the faintest attempt to swallow. It was a simple action, but to Caleb, it felt monumental. "He is fighting," Dr. Carter murmured. "That is a very good sign." Caleb's gaze softened, the quiet weight in his eyes shifting into something gentler. "He deserves a chance," he said. "Whatever happened out there, he deserves more than that." Dr. Carter nodded. "You gave him that chance by stopping." A silence followed, warm and thoughtful, carrying the unspoken truth that not everyone would have. Caleb looked down at the small life barely larger than his own hand. His voice was steady when he spoke again. "What is next?" Dr. Carter checked the pup's temperature and adjusted the blanket. "He needs consistent warmth and rest. I want to monitor him for a few hours. If he keeps responding, we can move him to a small recovery kennel." Caleb nodded, though he did not move from his place beside the table. He watched as the puppy's tiny paws curled weakly, as though dreaming of a world far bigger than its body currently allowed. The soft hum of the heater filled the room, blending with the faint ticking of a wall clock. Time seemed to slow, stretching into a quiet rhythmic pulse that matched the fragile rise and fall of the pup's breath. A gentle breeze drifted through the slightly open window, carrying the scent of warm pavement and blooming wildflowers from the nearby field. It brushed lightly across Caleb's face, stirring something inside him that he had not felt in a long time. Not duty. Not responsibility. Something softer. Something like hope. The puppy let out a small sound, a hush of breath that barely reached the air. Caleb leaned in, eyes steady and warm. "You hold on," he whispered, voice low but anchored with quiet faith. "You are not alone. Not anymore." The tiny German Shepherd responded with the faintest flicker beneath the blanket, a fragile echo of life that seemed to answer him in return. The hours stretched gently inside the small clinic room, softened by the steady warmth of the heating pad and the quiet patience that settled over everything. Caleb remained near the exam table, his posture relaxed but attentive, as though some part of him had anchored itself beside the tiny German Shepherd puppy and refused to drift away. Dr. Laney Carter checked the pup's temperature once more, her expression easing into something cautiously hopeful. "He is holding steady," she murmured, almost to herself. "If he keeps responding like this, we may see more movement soon." Caleb nodded, his eyes never leaving the small rise and fall beneath the blanket. He has a strong spirit, he said softly. Even if his body is tired. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the warm scent of freshly cut grass from a nearby property. Sunlight filtered through the window blinds, painting soft stripes across the blanket and warming the metal table. The puppy's small paws twitched gently in response, as if trying to stretch into the light. Dr. Carter adjusted the blanket around him. Sometimes, she said, pausing for a moment, animals fight hardest when someone finally sees them. Caleb understood that more than he cared to admit. In the quiet moments overseas, he had learned how much it meant to be seen, even in silence, even through exhaustion. He moved closer, lowering his hand so the pup could sense him. The warmth beneath the towel shifted, a tiny push, the brief lift of a small head before it settled again. Caleb breathed in, slow and steady. "There you go," he whispered. "I knew you were in there." Dr. Carter watched the interaction with a soft smile, then stepped back to prepare a small syringe of fluids that would help keep the puppy hydrated. Her movements were careful, precise, but there was tenderness woven into every action. The room hummed gently with the low sound of an air vent, a subtle rhythm that matched the fragile heartbeat beneath the blanket. Caleb slid his thumb lightly along the edge of the fabric, close enough for the puppy to feel but not close enough to overwhelm. The pup nudged its nose toward his hand, a tiny gesture that lasted only a second but carried the weight of trust beginning to form. Dr. Carter returned and administered the solution slowly, making sure the pup remained comfortable. "He is responding well," she said quietly. "It will take time, but I think he is trying." Caleb felt something inside him settle, not with certainty, but with a gentle conviction that small signs mattered. Sometimes life whispered instead of shouting. Sometimes survival arrived one breath at a time. The clinic door opened slightly, letting in a warm draft and a faint murmur of distant conversation. Caleb did not look away from the table. The puppy shifted again, a soft sound escaping its throat, like a small hum carried on hope. "There it is," Caleb murmured. "That is the sound of a fighter." Sunlight deepened across the room, draping everything in a soft gold that brushed the edges of the blanket and warmed the air. The puppy's breaths grew. A little stronger, a little fuller, as though the world was slowly becoming a place it could remain. Caleb kept his voice low, steady, a promise wrapped in gentle words. "You are safe," he whispered. "I am right here." And in that quiet, the fragile life beneath the blanket answered with the smallest flicker of strength, a reminder that even hope, when faint, can still rise. The steady glow of late afternoon settled through the clinic windows, casting long bands of warm light across the exam table where the tiny German Shepherd puppy continued his quiet fight. Hours had passed, yet the room held the same gentle steadiness, as if time itself had paused out of respect for the fragile life wrapped in soft fabric. Dr. Laney Carter checked the pup's temperature once again, her expression shifting into something that resembled cautious optimism. "He is warming up well," she said softly, almost whispering the words so they would not disturb the delicate rhythm of the moment. Caleb stood close, his presence calm and anchored, the kind of patience forged not through comfort but through years of learning how to hold still when the world wavered around him. The puppy, nestled beneath the folded towel, let out a small exhale that warmed the air above him. The sound was soft, barely more than a sigh, but it carried a depth that made Caleb step just a little closer. "There you go," he murmured gently. "Just keep breathing." The hum of the small heater created a steady backdrop, a quiet heartbeat that filled the room. Dust motes drifted lazily in the golden light, making everything feel suspended, softer somehow, as if the world had exhaled and eased the edges of the day. Dr. Carter returned with a second small syringe of fluids. "This will help him continue to recover," she said as she prepared it. "His body is still tired, but he is responding better than I expected for a puppy his size." Caleb nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. "He has a stubborn streak," he said, a quiet smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I can tell." As the fluid was carefully administered, the puppy shifted, a small movement but more coordinated than before. His tiny paws pushed gently against the blanket as though searching for a memory of warmth or safety. Caleb's breath caught. For a moment. It was not dramatic, not loud, but it was unmistakably a sign of life returning. "That is it," he whispered. "You keep fighting." Dr. Carter stepped back, noticing the subtle change. "He is starting to show more responsiveness," she said with a hopeful nod. "If he keeps this up, we may see him open his eyes soon." The puppy let out a faint sound, not a cry, not a whine, but something between a hum and a breath, as if acknowledging the voices around him. Caleb cupped his hand near the edge of the blanket, allowing the tiny nose to sense him. The pup leaned subtly toward the warmth, a gesture so small that someone not watching closely might have missed it entirely. But to Caleb, it was everything. The window cracked open slightly, letting in a drift of warm air carrying the scent of sunlit concrete and early evening flowers from the field outside. The breeze touched the room with a gentle warmth that wrapped around the edges of the moment like a soft promise. Caleb lowered his voice, steady and calm. "You are doing great," he said. "I am right here." The puppy's breathing deepened, steady and slow, like a fragile rhythm learning how to be strong again. Dr. Carter glanced at Caleb, her voice quiet. "He is holding on because someone stayed with him." Caleb did not answer, but his presence spoke for him. And in that warm, sunlit room, the tiny German shepherd answered too, with the faintest yet strongest breath he had taken all day. The evening light softened into a gentle amber hue as it filtered through the clinic windows, settling over the small room where the tiny German shepherd puppy continued his quiet climb toward life. The warmth from the heating pad cocooned him in a steady glow, and the fragile rise and fall of his breath had grown just a little fuller, as though the world around him was slowly beginning to feel safe. Caleb remained close, standing with a stillness that felt almost protective. His hands rested lightly on the edge of the exam table, not touching the little pup yet but ready to offer comfort the moment it was needed. Dr. Laney Carter checked the chart she had been updating, her expression brightening with each small improvement. "His temperature has reached a stable point," she said, a note of relief slipping into her voice. "This is a very good step forward." The puppy shifted beneath the blanket as if responding to her words. A tiny paw pushed gently at the soft fabric, a small but unmistakable attempt to stretch. Caleb leaned closer, his voice no louder than a whisper. "There you are," he murmured. "I see you waking up." Dr. Carter smiled at the sound of his voice reaching the pup. "He knows who is here," she said. "Animals notice steady hearts." Caleb looked at her but said nothing. He returned his focus to the tiny body nestled beneath the warm towel, watching each breath like a promise. Outside, the soft rustling of leaves brushed against the building as the early evening breeze carried the scent of warm pavement and the distant sweetness of blooming clover. The world beyond the clinic felt calm, unhurried, as if holding space for this fragile moment. Dr. Carter lifted the corner of the blanket ever so slightly. "Let us see if he can manage to lift his head again," she said, her tone encouraging but careful. The little pup responded with the faintest push, its small neck trembling with effort before rising just an inch from the blanket. The movement lasted only a heartbeat, but Caleb felt it like a surge of light. "That is it," he whispered, warmth filling his voice. "Just a little at a time." The pup rested again, settling into the soft folds of the fabric, but something had shifted. His breathing, once shallow and uncertain, now carried a steadier rhythm. A quiet determination pulsed beneath each inhale. Dr. Carter observed the subtle change and nodded with genuine hope. "His strength is returning," she said. "Slowly, but it is there." The room seemed to brighten as if the setting sun had leaned in closer. Shadows softened along the floor, and the golden light gathered around the exam table like an unspoken blessing. Caleb moved his hand a little closer, leaving it near enough for the pup to feel the warmth of his skin. The puppy nudged toward it, a tiny gesture of recognition, acknowledging the presence that had stayed by his side since morning. Caleb exhaled, the sound tender, quiet. "You are doing so well," he said. "I am right here." Dr. Carter stepped back, giving space to the moment unfolding between Marine and pup. If he keeps progressing, she said softly, we may try letting him rest in a recovery kennel for the night. Caleb nodded, never lifting his eyes from the tiny form wrapped in the warm blanket. The pup let out a delicate hum, a sound filled with softness and trust, barely touching the air but enough to reach the heart of the man watching over him. And as evening settled fully around the quiet clinic, that small sound carried the gentle certainty of a life choosing to stay. Night settled slowly over the small clinic, bringing with it a tender quiet that wrapped the room in soft shadows and gentle warmth. The overhead lights had been dimmed to a low glow, allowing the tiny German Shepherd puppy to rest without strain, while a small lamp on the counter cast a circle of golden light that made the space feel almost like a sanctuary. Caleb remained beside the exam table, his posture steady, as though his stillness alone could anchor the fragile life fighting beside him. Dr. Laney Carter finished her notes, then stepped toward the table with a careful calm. He is strong enough now for a recovery kennel, she said softly. Just a small one, with extra warmth. It will help him rest better through the night. Caleb nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the small bundle breathing beneath the blanket. Will he be all right on his own? He asked, his voice quiet, not from fear but from a tenderness that had grown naturally over the hours. Dr. Carter's expression softened. He will not be alone, she said gently. I will check on him often. And he will still feel your scent on the blanket. That comfort matters more than you realize. Caleb reached out and touched the very edge of the blanket, letting the warmth beneath it meet his fingertips. The puppy stirred, nudging weakly toward the familiar presence he had come to trust. A faint sound escaped him, a tiny hum that drifted into the air like a fragile echo. It tightened something in Caleb's chest, something quiet and human and deeply protective. Dr. Carter prepared the small kennel with a soft fleece pad, a heating element, and the same towel the pup had been wrapped in. Everything was done with gentle precision, as though preparing a cradle for a fragile spark of light. When she returned to the table, she lifted the pup with both hands, cradling him with a care that made Caleb exhale slowly. He is so small, she murmured, almost to herself. But I have seen smaller fighters do miracles. The puppy blinked groggily, eyelids fluttering in faint effort. It was the first real sign of awakening, even if brief and weakened by exhaustion. Caleb stepped closer, unable to hide the warmth that rose in his voice. There he is, he whispered. Trying to see the world again. Dr. Carter placed the pup gently into the recovery kennel. The blanket settled around him, shaping to the tiny body that had fought quietly all day. The heating pad hummed beneath him, sending a steady warmth upward that eased his small frame into rest. The puppy's breathing deepened, not fully strong but no longer fragile enough to fear each minute. Caleb crouched near the kennel door, his hands resting lightly on his knees. I will be back in the morning, he said softly. You keep resting. The puppy shifted just a little, pressing his nose into the fold of the blanket that carried Caleb's scent. Dr. Carter watched the scene with a quiet smile. He knows your voice, she said. And your presence. That bond will help him heal. The lamp's glow reflected in Caleb's eyes as he looked at the small form nestled safely inside the kennel. The room felt warmer, the silence no longer heavy but full of gentle possibility. And as the evening deepened outside the windows, the little German Shepherd answered the world with one more soft breath, steady and sure, as though choosing once again to stay. The clinic had grown quieter as night deepened, the soft hum of machines blending with the steady warmth radiating from the small recovery kennel. The tiny German Shepherd puppy slept curled in the center of the fleece pad, his breathing slow and even, each inhale carrying a little more strength than the hour before. Dr. Laney Carter stepped out to check on another patient, leaving Caleb alone with the fragile life he had carried from the roadside into this room of gentle light. Caleb crouched beside the kennel, his forearms resting on his knees, his voice a soft murmur hardly louder than the whisper of the heater. You are doing well, he breathed. Just rest. The puppy stirred slightly at the sound, not fully awake. but aware enough to nuzzle deeper into the blanket that held the faint scent of the man who had refused to leave him behind. Caleb watched the small movement with a quiet tenderness that softened his usually steady composure. The moments passed slowly, filling with the subtle shifting of night air and the smell of clean linen and warm fur. The overhead lamp cast a soft golden halo around the kennel, making the tiny body inside it look almost like a fragile ember glowing in the dimness. Caleb felt time stretch, the kind of time that does not need rushing, the kind that holds a man steady enough to remember why presence matters. He let his fingers rest near the kennel door, palm open so the pup could sense him even in sleep. The response came as a faint, instinctive lean of the small head toward the warmth, a gesture so slight it nearly vanished in the folds of the blanket. Caleb breathed out slowly. "You are not alone. Not tonight." Moments later, Dr. Carter returned, quiet footsteps announcing her presence. She paused at the doorway, watching the scene with softened eyes. "He is bonding with you," she said gently. "That kind of trust helps more than anything I can give him." Caleb glanced up, the warm light reflecting in his eyes. "He just needed someone to stop," he said, voice low, steady. "Someone to notice he was still trying." Dr. Carter nodded. "And you did." She approached the kennel to check the puppy's breathing, her movements precise yet full of care. As she lifted the blanket slightly, the pup blinked. One small flutter. Then another. His eyes did not fully open, but the intention was there, a spark pressing against exhaustion. Caleb leaned in, hope easing across his features like dawn touching the horizon. "Hey there," he whispered. "Look at you." The puppy managed a tiny sound, faint and breathy, but unmistakably alive. Dr. Carter's face brightened. "This is a very good sign," she said softly. "He is trying to wake up." The pup's eyelids hovered halfway for a moment, revealing a glimpse of soft brown beneath. It lasted only a heartbeat before sleep pulled him back under, but the moment held weight, a whisper of miracle unfolding in the small glow of the kennel. Caleb rested his hand beside the door again, the warmth of his skin reaching the pup through the narrow opening. "I am right here," he murmured. "Take your time." Outside the clinic, the night settled into a peaceful stillness. Inside, a fragile life continued to rise, breath by breath, toward the promise of morning. The night deepened into a soft velvet quiet, settling gently around the small clinic as if the world itself understood the need for calm. The tiny German Shepherd puppy slept inside the recovery kennel, his breathing steady and warm, the fragile rhythm of earlier now strengthened by hours of safety and care. A low lamp cast a circle of gold across the floor, and within that glow, the fragile life that had once flickered dangerously close to fading now pulsed with quiet determination. Caleb remained nearby, seated on a simple wooden chair pulled close to the kennel. His posture was relaxed but attentive, the kind of presence shaped by years of watching over those who needed him. His elbows rested loosely on his knees, and his eyes stayed fixed on the little figure curled beneath the soft blanket. Dr. Laney Carter returned with a clipboard in hand, but her steps were slow, respectful of the stillness in the room. She paused beside Caleb, observing the gentle rise and fall of the pup's chest. "He is stabilizing beautifully," she whispered. "If he continues like this, we might see him fully wake by morning." Caleb nodded, unable to hide the warmth tugging quietly at his expression. "He has come a long way today." Dr. Carter smiled softly. "So have you." She left the two of them alone again, giving space to the fragile bond that had formed without effort or intention, the kind that grows only in moments carved out of quiet and hope. Caleb leaned forward slightly. His voice came low, barely more than a breath. "You are stronger than you know," he murmured. Inside the kennel, the puppy stirred. Not the weak, uncertain movement of before, but something new. A faint lift of the head, a subtle shift of the tiny body, as though testing newly gathered strength. Caleb held perfectly still, not wanting to interrupt whatever was unfolding. The puppy's eyelids fluttered once. Then again. A pause followed, the air holding its breath with Caleb. And then, softly, slowly, the pup's eyes opened. Not wide, not fully, but enough to reveal a pair of warm, dark brown irises blinking into the gentle glow of the lamp. Caleb inhaled sharply, but quietly, the sound filled with awe rather than urgency. "There you are," he whispered, his voice thickened by a feeling he did not try to name. The puppy blinked again, focusing with effort, his small body trembling under the strain of awakening. His gaze drifted toward the open space of the kennel door until it found the shape of the man watching him. The tiny nose lifted just an inch, scenting the familiar presence that had stayed beside him through the long night. Caleb moved his hand closer, palm up near the opening. The warm air between hand and pup seemed to shift as the little one inched forward, a slow, deliberate crawl that carried more courage than strength. When the pup's head finally rested against the edge of Caleb's fingers, something soft settled over the room, quieter than breath, deeper than words. "You made it," Caleb murmured. The puppy answered with a tiny sound, fragile but full of life, a gentle acknowledgement of the man who had heard a movement on a silent roadside and refused to walk away. The lamp flickered slightly, warming the golden air, and for the first time since sunrise, hope no longer felt fragile. It felt real. The tiny German Shepherd puppy kept his eyes open a little longer this time, the soft brown irises reflecting the warm glow of the lamp as though the world had just begun to take shape around him. His breathing, once fragile and uncertain, settled into a gentle rhythm that filled the quiet clinic room with a kind of peace that felt almost sacred. Caleb leaned closer, careful not to overwhelm the little one who had fought so hard to wake. His hand rested near the opening of the kennel, palm steady, offering warmth without asking anything in return. The pup shifted, inching forward with small trembling steps until his tiny nose brushed Caleb's fingers. The contact was brief, no more than a soft tap of warm fur against skin, but it held the weight of something deeper. A moment of trust. A moment of choosing. Dr. Lainey Carter approached, her soft-soled shoes barely making a sound against the tile floor. She paused when she saw the connection unfolding, her smile touched with the quiet pride of someone witnessing a fragile miracle continue to take shape. "He knows you," she whispered, keeping her voice low so as not to startle the pup. "He is responding to you more than anything else in this room." Caleb did not look away from the small figure pressing into his hand. "He remembered the road," Caleb murmured. "He remembered someone stopped." The pup let out a soft, airy sound, almost like a sigh of relief, before placing his tiny paw, still unsteady, but determined, onto the edge of Caleb's hand. Dr. Carter's breath caught gently at the sight. "That is his first voluntary movement toward someone since he arrived," she said. "He is not just waking up. He is choosing connection." The lamp's gentle glow deepened as evening stretched further, draping the room in warm amber that softened every shadow. Caleb moved his thumb just slightly, enough for the pup to feel a shift without losing his sense of safety. The puppy's eyes followed the motion, not sharply, not fully focused yet, but with unmistakable awareness. His tail gave the faintest twitch beneath the blanket, a small flicker of life rediscovering itself. Dr. Carter checked the pup's temperature and hydration levels, noting the steady improvements. "He is gaining strength faster than expected," she said softly. "By morning, he may even try to stand." Caleb felt the words settle inside him, their warmth spreading through his chest. He had been there when hope seemed too faint to touch, when breath came in fragile intervals, when the smallest movement had felt like a plea. Now, watching the little one lift his head with effort, he understood that this moment was not just recovery. It was resurrection. The pup blinked slowly, his gaze steadying on Caleb as if memorizing the face that had carried him away from silence and cold. Caleb lowered his voice to a whisper, the words shaped from something deeper than mere reassurance. "You are safe now," he said. "Take all the time you need." The puppy responded by pressing his head gently against Caleb's fingers, a gesture of fragile loyalty forming in its very first hour of awareness. Outside, the night wind brushed softly against the windows, and somewhere in the stillness of that quiet room, a bond took root between a Marine who refused to look away and a small life that refused to stop breathing. The small German Shepherd puppy kept his head resting against Caleb's fingers, drawing in the warmth as though it were the first sunlight he had ever known. His eyes, still soft with exhaustion, lingered on the man who had waited through the long night, and in that gentle gaze there was something fragile yet unmistakable, recognition. Dr. Laney Carter moved quietly around the room, checking charts and adjusting small readings, but even she paused from time to time to witness the quiet bond unfolding beside the kennel. "He is responding to you more than any treatment I can give," she said softly, not wanting to break the calm. "Sometimes a life needs presence more than medicine." Caleb absorbed her words without speaking. He kept his hand steady, letting the pup decide how close to come, how much trust to offer. The puppy inched forward again, his tiny paws pressing into the blanket with effort, his body trembling from the strain but determined all the same. His nose brushed Caleb's hand once more, firmer now, as if to confirm what he had sensed earlier. Caleb smiled gently, the expression small but full of something deeper than relief. "There you go," he murmured. "I am right here." The pup blinked slowly, eyelids heavy but no longer weighed down by the kind of weakness that steals breath. Instead, there was a softness, a comfort, as though the small life had finally settled into a place where fear could no longer reach him. Dr. Carter finished her notes and stepped closer, examining the puppy with a practiced but tender touch. "His hydration is improving," she observed. "His temperature is holding steady. These are very strong indicators." She paused, her voice dipping into something almost reverent. "He chose a direction today. Toward life." The words drifted into the warm air, settling in the quiet space between the three of them. Caleb let his hand slip just a little farther into the kennel, offering more warmth, more reassurance. The puppy pressed into it, a tiny sigh escaping him, not of exhaustion but of relief. Outside, the wind shifted softly, brushing against the clinic windows with a whispering hush. The night sky had deepened into a blanket of stars, and the moon cast a pale glow over the empty parking lot. It felt as though the world had fallen into a soft stillness just to honor this moment. Caleb lowered his voice, speaking as though the words were meant for only one small set of ears. "You are safe now," he whispered. "I will not leave you." The puppy's tail moved, the faintest flutter beneath the blanket, like a tiny heartbeat of gratitude. Dr. Carter watched the gesture and nodded with quiet admiration. "That," she said, "is trust." Caleb remained still, letting the weight of the moment sink in. He had carried the pup from silence into shelter, from the edge of breath into warmth. Now, watching those small eyes close again, not from weakness, but from comfort, he felt something settle inside him too. In the hush of the dimly lit clinic, with the soft hum of machines and the faint rhythm of a tiny life leaning into its protector, one truth rose gently in the room: some acts of faith do not need words, and some bonds do not need time to form. They only need a quiet heartbeat and a willing hand. Morning approached softly, brushing the edges of the clinic windows with a pale silver glow that seemed to seep gently into the quiet room. The tiny German Shepherd puppy stirred beneath his blanket, no longer with the fragile trembling of the night before, but with the first hints of true waking, as though dawn had reached him from the inside. Caleb sat exactly where he had been for hours, close enough for the pup to feel the warmth of his presence. His shoulders eased as he watched the little one lift his head again, this time with more certainty, more intention. Dr. Laney Carter stepped in quietly, her eyes widening with relief as she observed the small but confident movements. "Look at him," she whispered. "He made it through the night." Caleb smiled faintly, an expression softened by gratitude. "He did not do it alone," he said, though his voice remained hushed, as if not to disturb the morning calm. The puppy blinked up at both of them, his eyes clearer now, reflecting the warm light as though the room itself had become a place where miracles could stretch their limbs. He shifted forward, putting weight on his tiny paws, unsteady but determined. Caleb opened the kennel door just a few inches, and the pup took a shaky step toward him, slipping only slightly before finding balance again. "Easy," Caleb murmured, one hand steady near the floor. "Take your time." The puppy reached him, pressing his small head against Caleb's palm with a softness that carried the weight of every breath he had fought for. Dr. Carter watched with a quiet awe. "Some animals survive because of treatment," she said. "Some survive because someone's presence gives them a reason." Caleb looked down at the pup nestled into his hand, his heartbeat steady and strong beneath the fragile body. "He chose to stay," Caleb said quietly. "I just stayed with him." The puppy curled into the crook of Caleb's fingers, letting out a tiny sound, half sigh, half contentment, as though he had finally found the place where his small world could begin again. Sunlight warmed the room further, draping soft gold over the exam table, the kennel, and the Marine who had stopped on an empty roadside because something in him recognized a life that still whispered for help. Dr. Carter gathered her charts, giving them space while the morning settled fully around them. "He is ready to leave the kennel," she said gently. "When you are ready, you can hold him." Caleb lifted the pup with both hands, careful and reverent, as though holding something newly formed. The puppy rested against his chest, his tiny heartbeat tapping gently against the steady rhythm beneath Caleb's uniform. And for a moment, the room felt suspended, quiet, warmed by something beyond sunlight. The world outside began to stir, cars passing, birds calling, but inside the clinic, a different kind of dawn unfolded. A Marine, carrying a small life that had chosen to stay. A puppy, resting against the one person who had heard him when the world was silent. In that stillness, a truth settled softly between them: hope does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it breathes once on a cold roadside, waits for a hand to lift it, and grows into something steady enough to share its warmth with another soul.